Pacific Western region of the Unitarian Universalist Association. I'm the Reverend Sarah Schurr, and I'm the small congregation specialist from the Pacific Western region, and I'm delighted to present this information to you today. Let's talk first about what I mean when I say worship. Worship means worth shaping. It comes from the Old English. It's about holding up and giving life the shape of what is most worthy in our lives. So think of worship as worth shaping. Our worship time is a chance to be together, to gain energy, and to gain inspiration. And worship is not necessarily a bowing down to a deity. It can be for some people, but for a lot of Unitarian Universalists, that's not what it means. And we can certainly use the word in its original content of worth shaping in our Unitarian Universalist congregations. And worship is so important in our congregations. Worship brings the community together on a regular basis. Worship is what distinguishes us from other great groups. There are a lot of other great nonprofits out there, from Planned Parenthood to the Sierra Club to the various other social justice groups, and they do good work in the world, but they're not a Unitarian Universalist congregation. They don't do worship. So worship helps distinguish us as a religious organization apart from other nonprofits. Worship inspires us and strengthens us to do our good work in the world. And worship shows new folks who we are and what we believe. Now, it used to be that a Unitarian fellowship was an education center. Back in the 60s, people came to Unitarian congregations to learn new things. I mean, where else could you learn Buddhist meditation or Sufi poetry or the latest information about humanism? Back in the 60s, that's what a Unitarian fellowship often was, as a place to learn these new things, to be exposed to new things. But today we have the internet. That's often where people go when they want to learn new things and be exposed to ideas they never could have found other ways. Yes, people's needs are changing, and today, new Unitarian Universalists are coming to our congregations to make meaning. Yes, UU congregations need to be a place of meaning making for people who are barraged with information all day long. They don't need more information. What they need to do is make meaning out of the information they have already. Now, that's tricky to do as lay people. When there is no minister in your congregation, you're often making a choice between lay sermons, guest speakers from the community, or some kind of a video presentation. And even when there is a minister, I know that small congregations often have part-time ministers who preach maybe once or twice a month. Even full-time ministers do not preach every single week. Generally, a full-time minister is in the pulpit 3 times a month. So lay-led worship is often still a vital part of a UU congregation. And filling the calendar can sometimes be hard. Finding appropriate community speakers to come and speak to us on Sunday mornings, that can be challenging. And sometimes we can't always afford to pay speaker fees if we want somebody who's really good. And sometimes our members just don't think they have anything to say in a sermon. They don't know what they'd offer a sermon about that doesn't just sound like them talking about their hobby. And frankly, some of our services can lack spiritual depth. Uninspiring services, they drag down the energy of a community. They sometimes feel too much like a community college classroom than a special place of worship where we hold up and shape what is most worthy. Good worship should do 3 things at least. It should inspire, it should comfort, and it should help us make meaning. Yes, worship should inspire, comfort, and help with meaning making. Good worship is something you can create. Worship that speaks to the whole person in every service. Good worship should touch the emotional part of our lives with stirring music or a moving story. The intellectual parts of our lives helping us ponder ideas in a new way. It should help us with our active self, inspiring actions in the world, and it should speak to the spiritual part of our lives with meditations, rituals, and those important times of silence. They say that worship has an arc. A really good worship has a clear beginning, middle, and an end. And there's all sorts of fancy words for those, but I'd like to think of it as a sandwich. You begin with something easy to hold on to that's pretty approachable, like a good piece of bread. The challenging material, the transcendent material, the things that are likely to get a little bit messy, those go in the center. And you finish again with something empowering, uplifting, and that keeps it all nice and tidy. So with a sandwich, that might be a piece of bread, some peanut butter and jelly, and another piece of bread. In a worship service, that might be opening readings, a chalice lighting, some singing, then some kind of a sermon, some kind of a ritual, some kind of a transcendent experience, and then finish up with another reading and some hymns and things to get people ready to go out into the world again. One great way to do lay-led worship services with good quality sermons is to have a This I Believe program. And I've got a way to make them new and improved. Sometimes I've heard This I Believe services that sounded a little bit more like This I Reject. They're all about people's decisions to not believe what they used to. And not that that's unimportant, but a really good This I Believe sermon does better to talk about what you do believe more than what you don't believe. And one of the ways to do that is with the big questions of systematic theology. Systematic theology is a set of big religious questions that can be answered to help us discern what people's beliefs are and explain them to other people. So for each of the big questions of systematic theology, I would invite the speaker to say, what do I myself believe in response to this question? How does this belief impact how I live? How do I know what I know? Why do I believe this? And how does this belief fit with my other beliefs? Is there consistency amongst my beliefs? And here are the big questions of systematic theology. Is there some kind of God, goddess, source of all, higher power, unifying energy, Jedi force, whatever you want to call it? Is there something? And if so, how would you describe it? Second big question, what is the nature of human beings? Are we born good or bad? Do we stay that way? What changes us for the better or for the worse, if anything? The third question, does our life have meaning? What's the point of our existence? What are we here for? What can and should we do to live a good and meaningful life? Number 4, what is the nature of evil? Why do people do bad things? What can we do about it? And what should we do when we know we have done wrong? 5, what happens to us after we die? How does this inform how we live? And here my numbers are out of order, but the next one would be 6. Who might we use as an example of a life well lived? Is there anyone who inspires you and provides for you a great role model? And last but not least, what is the purpose and nature of the church, the temple, the fellowship, any religious organization? Why do we gather in this way? What should we do when we come together as a religious organization? And what is the role of your own Unitarian Universalist congregation in the world? These are the questions of systematic theology that you can choose to address all of, or maybe just one or two, in a This I Believe sermon, talking about what you yourself believe about these things, and why you believe them, and how that affects how you live your life, and how your beliefs may be consistent with one another. So if you have a series, let's say you did a series of This I Believe, you could do one This I Believe per month. Ask folks of different ages and different backgrounds. And if you live near another congregation that also does a This I Believe series, you could have a lay pulpit exchange where you hear one of their This I Believe services and they hear one of yours. That's another way to do lay-led services that can um, speak to meaning making and be something past a community college lecture. It's one of them is the three personal stories, the set of three speakers, as I sometimes call it. You ask three different people to tell their personal stories related to their Unitarian Universalist faith, all on one common topic. So no one person has to do an entire sermon. If you have three people, that would be one person each talking for 5 to 7 minutes each. That's not so hard. So you give them a specific topic and a specific theme. And it is nice to get people of different ages and different backgrounds to do this. So let's say on Mother's Day, you have one woman who chose not to be a parent, one who is parenting children right now, and one whose children are all adult. Speaking about what mothering and parenting is in their life, how it impacts them, how their Unitarian Universalist beliefs inform their choices, and how their choices have impounded their beliefs. All the speakers talk about their own values and the meaning in their lives. So on Veterans Day, you could have three veterans from three different wars sharing their UU faith and how it is changed by and challenged by their religious time in the military. I've heard some really great speakers from different wars talk about how their UU faith was challenged and was enhanced by this experience. On Labor Day, have three different people share how they live their UU values at work every day. I heard a profound essay from a psychiatric nurse once talking about how she finds the inherent worth and dignity in every person, even people who are profoundly mentally ill, as she served them as their nurse. One of the resources I hope you've discovered is Worship Web. The website there is www.uua.org/worship. It is a resource for all congregations. It has good worship advice from the Unitarian Universalist Association. There are readings on almost all topics. These are mostly professionally written sermons, readings, and Unitarian Universalist rituals that are curated and selected specifically for use in congregations. Worship Web is a service of the Unitarian Universalist Association. You can use the materials at no cost. You are asked, of course, to attribute the author when you use them. So you can go into their search engine and search by author or keyword or title. So you can go to look for your favorite minister or UU poet, or you can look for what do you have for Arbor Day? And it'll tell you a list of things. Again, it's all curated material, so they are choosy what they put in and what they don't. Another option is some of the theme-based ministry packages, like Soul Matters. It is easiest to do good worship when you have themes. So like one theme, 1 month or 1 week, you might choose the theme of wonder. Another theme might be vulnerability, presence, transformation, risk. When you have these theme-based ministries, it's easier to have things be cohesive. And a program like Soul Matters will provide pre-packaged theme-based worship where you'll get a sermon, religious education materials for children and for adults. You'll get readings, you'll get activities. It's a wonderful way to have an entire staff putting together a theme-based ministry program for you that happens to be somewhere else and just sends you this great packages of material. Soul Matters, as I said, provides readings and sermons, RE programs, coaching and networking, and connections with other Unitarian Universalist congregations using Soul Matters. It's made to help you go deeper, but I will warn you, Soul Matters is not free. It costs $500 to $750 to join, and then there's a $250 a year maintenance fee after that to keep involved, but many congregations have found it really useful. Here's the web page if you're interested. It's www.soulmatterssharingcircle.com. There's also some really good books I'd like to hold up for you. One is by Erica Hewitt, who happens to be the curator of Worship Web that I mentioned earlier. Erica's book is called The Shared Pulpit, and it's a sermon seminar for lay leaders and lay people. So you can go through and have an adult religious education course just on going through this seminar in Erica's book and really come out with some good resources. There's also this handy little thing called the Handbook for Religious Services that's put out by the Church of the Larger Fellowship. It's inexpensive, simple, easy to have on your bookshelf, and it's got basic readings and formats for everything from a Sunday worship service to a funeral to a wedding to a baby blessing. It's sort of, I think of it as the Book of Common Prayer for UUs. Now, as I said, lay services really can have depth and really can speak to meaning if people speak from the heart and their own experience. If the celebrant of the service understands the nature of good worship and how good worship is not the same as a lecture series, and if these services are grounded in our faith, they really can have depth. But it's hard to do lay-led services of good quality every single week. I strongly recommend you have a sermon from a Unitarian Universalist minister at least once a month at your congregation. For one thing, it helps ground your services in our UU faith. And it gives lay people a good example of what worship looks like and how to do it well, so they get a sense of what they're aiming at. Video sermons count. Here's a little picture of me doing a video sermon years ago. Small congregations can watch the sermon or the whole service that's been filmed at another congregation that tapes their services. You can go to YouTube and find some of these sermons, or you can go to churches' websites. YouTube has professional sermons recorded by UU churches, some of the big ones like Dallas and Williamsburg. You go to the YouTube search engine and go Unitarian Universalist Sermons. I'm not talking here about TED Talks, by the way. As exciting as TED Talks can be, I'm talking about Unitarian Universalist sermons because they are different. There are some churches who also post the videos of their sermon every week on their webpage. The technology is easy. If you have an in-focus machine or something like that, you just bring up the web materials and project it on a screen or on a white wall. The technology is not difficult. But please keep in mind the quality of your relationships with other congregations. You are using professional services that other people have paid for. Please contact the featured minister and ask permission before using their materials in your service. And if the hosting church wants some compensation for using their materials, please work it out. It could be they will ask you to contribute $50 a service or something like that for using their materials. So please work out what's fair. It also is great when there can be a covenant between congregations where they can share some materials. Some congregations work out a covenantal relationship with neighboring churches where they share worship services. Sometimes they share staffing, like there'll be two nearby congregations and they'll each share a minister part-time, a minister or a religious educator or some other professional staff. And then sometimes there can be joint programs. This can be as simple as doing OWL classes together so that you have enough kids, or as complicated as doing a large worship series together. If you need help finding out how to do this, please reach out to your primary contact in the Pacific Western region for more information. I want to remind you that small congregations are incubators of innovation. Small congregations often have to find creative ways to solve problems, and when you find those solutions, you can share them with others, and they can share them with you, and there can be a wonderful way of cross-pollinating and learning new things from each other. Thanks so much for being with us at this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me the Small Congregation Specialist of the Pacific Western Region, Reverend Sarah Schurr, or your primary contact from the PWR. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.